Thanks for listening to Goddab Radio, a podcast for progressive thinking people. I'm Mad Dog Manser, and I'm here to bring you relevant and honest news and information that I find compelling. We cover politics, debunk conspiracy theories, report on cannabis, especially in Oregon, and feature guest interviews regularly. At Goddab Radio, we are ferociously progressive, fiercely skeptical, and forcefully scientific with a no-nonsense attitude. Today is Friday, April 21st, and today we have a great show in store. Our Conspiracy Hypotheses segment this week we will destroy the moon landing hoax hypothesis, almost as crazy as the flat earthers, and many of the same people actually. In Carnival Barks this week, we will cover more stupid Donald Trump bullshit from the week. You'll just have to listen to the Carnival Barks to find out what we're covering this week. And then, of course, we also are covering cannabis news this week, and we have some major Oregon cannabis news. That piece of shit, I can't say it any other way, Senator Ginny Burdick, senator from Washington County and co-chair of the Joint Committee on Marijuana, has introduced a ridiculous bill that will more than double the cost for an OMMP patient to grow cannabis somewhere other than their own home. And a few other tidbits that we also have this week relating to cannabis. As always, we want to thank our sponsors for helping make Goddab Radio possible, Honey Badger Sungrown and Oregon Cannabis Connection newspaper. And a special thanks to Eric Sky for allowing us to use his amazing song, One for the Green, to open and close our show. We really appreciate that. And like I said, this week we're starting off with the moon landing hoax. Can you believe these crazies? What are they thinking? Well, Rational Wiki breaks it down pretty well. And they start off their page with a quote from Duncan McMaster. Stanley Kubrick was hired to fake the moon landing, but his perfectionism made them film it on location on the moon. I gotta say, I love that. That's basically the way I think it is. The moon landing hoax refers to the belief of a small but persistent number of people who think that the Apollo moon landings of the late 60s and early 70s were staged and fake propaganda films produced by NASA in pursuit of embarrassing the USSR in the Cold War, as opposed to the actual moon landings taking place, being an infinitely greater triumph of the U.S. over the USSR. But disregard that fact. The exact form of such beliefs varies and can cover anything from the Apollo astronauts never went to space to they eventually landed on the moon, but the first landing was faked, to not to mention the wilder claims like the Apollo program was a front. They went, but on flying saucers. Yeah, right. There are people who believe that stuff. In the U.S., the hoax claim was originated by libertarian writer Bill Kaysing, who died in 2005, with his 1976 book, We Never Went to the Moon, America's $30 billion Swindle. It's a shame Kaysing is mostly remembered for that, because he also wrote some great books on sustainable living, privacy, hot springs, homelessness, cooking, and other topics. The hoax allegations have since reached the level of being a pop culture meme, such as the way JFK assassination theories are, and have been referenced in a number of works, from a Rammstein music video to Red Bull TV commercials. Nevertheless, true believers are limited to the ranks of diehard conspiracy theorists. And outside the United States, belief in it is usually correlated with general anti-U.S. sentiment. Yeah, of course, because, right, we were just trying to show up the Russians who got into space first, put the first man into space. Obviously, the Russians were ahead of us, so I guess that's a theory. A surprising number of people are not terribly well informed about something that happened almost 50 years ago. So, Let's get some facts straight first. The moon landing program was started by John F. Kennedy in response to the Soviet Union's early successes in space exploration. Just in case the world decided that those commies were right and communism was the way to go. Unsurprisingly, this is the thing most people or Americans seem able to remember. There have been 6 human landings on the moon between 1969 and 1972. The historic Apollo 11 in 1969, then Apollo 12 in 1969 as well, Apollo 14 in 1971, and we all know what happened to Apollo 13, thanks to Tom Hanks and Ron Howard. They didn't get to land. Apollo 15 in 1971, Apollo 16 in 1972, and Apollo 17 in 1972. Each landing delivered 2 astronauts to the surface, with a third one waiting for them in lunar orbit. There have been 3 more flights to the moon: the lunar flyby of Apollo 8 in 1968 to beat the Soviets, the Apollo 10 general rehearsal of a landing without actually landing in 1969, and the successful failure Apollo 13, which was badly damaged by an explosion during the flight, but managed to get the astronauts back to Earth alive. There is a mostly accurate movie with Tom Hanks about it. Of course. Each of the last 3 flights, 15, 16, and 17, carried the Lunar Roving Vehicle, or LRV, an electric car frame with wheels which allowed astronauts to get several miles away from the landing site and cover a lot more ground than they could have on foot. 3 more flights were originally planned, 18, 19, and 20, but they were canceled when the public decided that the U.S. had more pressing concerns than, quote, Whitey on the moon, unquote, such as the Vietnam War, and politicians pulled the plug. The extra spacecraft were used for the Skylab space station, occupied in 73 to 74, and the Apollo-Soyuz test project, 1975, Americans meeting Soviets in orbit for a few shots of vodka. The Apollo-Saturn combination was supposed to be replaced by a more versatile, safer, and cheaper system known as the Space Shuttle. And we all know that didn't turn out to be necessarily safer or cheaper, especially to the environment. The footage of Neil Armstrong going down the ladder and saying the small step line was shot by a TV camera cunningly attached to the side of the lander and deployed by pulling a cord. One of the ways a troll space nerds is to ask them who filmed Neil Armstrong coming out if he was the first man on the moon, right? Of course. Who's manning the camera? Anyway, the footage of the lunar module lifting off was shot by the lunar rover's TV camera that would be operated remotely from Earth. There are actually 3 attempts to film the ascent. On Apollo 15, the camera broke. On Apollo 16, the operator was too late and the LM flew out of the frame. On Apollo 17, he nailed it. See the takeoff video section below. And again, go to Rational Wiki, moon landing hoax, and you'll find all this information. The Soviets did have a manned lunar program, but it started in earnest 3 years later and never managed to get there due to a variety of problems, political, financial, and technical, including all 4 test flights of their heavy launch rocket ended in massive explosions. So there are a variety of conspiracy beliefs. There is, in fact, no single concrete moon landing conspiracy narrative. There are many, depending on the believer's gullibility or desire to believe. The following are only brief summaries of some of the most popular positions. The Flat Earthers. Flat Earthers believe space travel to be impossible for some reason, so the astronauts never left the Earth and the whole thing was filmed on the ground. For example, Charles K. Johnson, president of the Flat Earth Society, yes, there is a Flat Earth Society, folks, claimed that until the moon landings, quote, almost no one seriously considered the world a ball. The landings converted a few of them, but many are coming back now and getting off of it, unquote. But people did, in fact, believe that the Earth was round, and for many centuries prior to the moon landing. Columbus' original intent when he accidentally discovered America, never mind the fairly accurate estimation of the Earth's circumference by Eratosthenes, are but two of the many known references to belief in a round Earth predating the moon landing, which of course was 1967. And apparently Johnson somehow missed Sputnik 1 and the significant number of satellites launched in the 1960s. Maybe he thinks they crashed into the firmament. Johnson further believed that the Apollo missions were filmed by Hollywood studios and dismissed the then new space shuttle as a very ludicrous joke, though maybe you can't blame a flat earther for failing to grasp literal rocket science. Then there's the Vedic fundamentalism. A few hardline followers of the Hare Krishna movement refused to accept the landings because it would contradict what their holy texts say about the moon. For example, that it is further away than the sun, surrounded by fire and ice, and the source of planetary vegetation. Hare Krishnas, I'm just saying. This attitude dates back to the founder of the movement, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I can't handle some of those names. Sorry. And the time of the landings themselves, when Hare Krishna was, of course, founded in the 60s, though it doesn't seem to be a tenet of the modern ISKCON itself. The no orbit theory. A number of people are silent on the shape of the Earth, but nevertheless believe that no Apollo astronauts ever went into Earth orbit. This includes the subgroup believing that human spaceflight, or indeed spaceflight at all, is impossible for some other reasons. And then there's the only orbit. Folks, probably most common is a belief that the astronauts only went into a low orbit around the Earth. This is usually contradicted by the claim that the space outside low Earth orbit is filled by deadly radiation, as made, for example, by Bart Sibrel. Proponents of such claims never bother to check the facts, such as what kinds of ionizing radiation exist in space, what are their sources, what are the expected radiation levels, what protective measures are taken against them. Ignorance of space radiation and its effects can lead to amusing results, such as claiming that passing through the Van Allen belts would literally melt the Apollo spacecraft, while Van Allen himself stated it's all nonsense. Aforementioned Bill Kaysing argued for a middle ground between this option and the previous option, namely that Apollo spacecraft went into a low orbit on remote control, but astronauts themselves were whisked away to the moon set in Nevada before launch. The fact that an Apollo spacecraft would have been clearly visible on Earth orbit is completely ignored. For all we know, it was visible. Whether it was possible for anyone to identify it as an Apollo spacecraft, that's altogether a different question. Another theory is they landed at a later time. Some people believe that the earlier landings were faked, but that NASA finally managed to get there sometime in the 1970s. They assert that the program was behind schedule in the United States, faked reports of the first landings to fulfill Kennedy's unofficial deadline of, quote, before the decade is out, and or to score the first landing before the Soviets managed to get theirs. Personally, I think that if any of these had any sort of truth to them, that's the most logical. It would be that it was a purely political measure to beat the Soviets. I mean, that's the only one that makes any sort of possible sense to me. But they don't make sense. And then the real landings with fake pictures. A number of conspiracy theorists do accept that NASA went to the moon and, with unmanned probes, the rest of the solar system. However, the things those crafts saw were so incredible that the powers that be had to doctor the photographs to hide evidence of aliens or space Nazis or something. As usual, no good reason has ever been given for anyone wanting to conceal such a discovery. If extraterrestrial life or its remains were found in the solar system, all space programs would likely receive a mighty increase in funding, right? Examples are Richard Hoagland and Mike Barra, who have rebutted hoax claims but continue to use Apollo imagery as evidence for alien structures on the moon, and believe NASA is to be involved in all kinds of cover-ups, of course. Spaniard Juan Jose Benitez is another, saying Apollo 11 astronauts found an abandoned alien base and they destroyed with a nuclear bomb. This evidence was a secret NASA video, and that turned out to be fake and done by a Basque animation company. There's a link to that at Rational Wiki if you want to check that out. It's pretty funny. Independent journalist Marcus Allen has said that as a professional photographer, he is certain that none of the photographic materials from Apollo could have been obtained on the moon. For technical reasons, he appears to believe that 6 moon missions carried photographic equipment that was useless. Right? Oh, that's crazy. And then there's the Tito did it argument. At the start of 2012, some spammed a large number of websites with a YouTube video purporting to be the trailer of a docudrama, claiming that the technology for the moon landings was in fact developed by Yugoslavia, using the writings of Slovenian space exploration visionary pioneer Herman Nurdung Pochnik, who died in 1929. And that was later sold to the USA. Thanks to the aggressive promotion, the video managed to accumulate over 1 million views, but the documentary failed to materialize in the promised timeline, of course. As of 2014, it was still being filmed. It's the creation of Slovenian director Ziga Verch, who has a history of pulling stunts like that. His earlier movie, Trieste is Ours, gained a lot of publicity by being presented as a controversial nationalist documentary, but later it turned out to be a satirical movie about an eccentric World War II reenactor. Just a scam to get money to make a movie. That's all. The arguments for a conspiracy are drivel. The amount of drivel written by the Apollo landings could fill a wiki on its own. Following is just a sample of the kind of evidence and misrepresentations that are used to prop up the various conspiracy theories. First one is suppression. It is reported that Bill Kaysing, whose 1976 book started the madness, was originally requested by his publishers to write his book as a satire, but he somehow lost the plot and became convinced of the truth. Kaysing alleged that his own publishers were in cahoots with NASA to suppress the book, after he received a letter from his own editor saying that the manuscript wasn't good enough for publication. Kaysing then self-published the book and the letter, creating a false Streisand effect. We've discussed Streisand effect before, actually. I think it was when we did the flat Earth. Stars. Another argument. Proponents of the hoax theory insist that there are no stars visible in any of the footage or photographs taken on the moon. This is very true. Take any image at night and you'll very rarely see stars in the sky. This is because stars are faint things, which is the very reason you can't see them during the day. It takes the human eye a good few minutes to an hour to adjust to seeing all the stars in the sky, even on a clear night with little light pollution, because the rhodospin in our retinal photoreceptors needs time to unbleach. The widening of our irises is a secondary contributor, but occurs quickly compared to unbleaching. It's scientific. There's a scientific reason you can't see the stars, and the film couldn't capture the light. Cameras have the same issue, of course. They expose their shots for a certain length of time with a certain iris size or aperture. During the day, when it's nice and bright, exposures can be short and the aperture is tiny. But at night, the exposures must be very long and the aperture large. To see stars effectively, exposure times for the average camera need to be on the order of seconds. Indeed, so long that even the shortest exposures can reveal motion in the stars, which is hardly conducive to video footage. Alternatively, the aperture can be increased to let more light into the exposure. This could work for the video, but it would overexpose the rest of the footage, turning the asters and the lunar surface into one big bright white blob of nothing. Now, what would that do for the people? Those aren't astronauts. They're big white blobs of nothing, right? It's just This isn't just a hard hand wave to explain the moon landing photos. The exposure problem for observing stars exists on Earth and is very demonstrable. Just try to take a picture of the stars, or the planets for that matter, with a cell phone. Okay? Just give me a break. All right, then there's the sea rock conspiracy proof. On one image purports to show the letter C on a rock, but it's rather obviously a fiber on somebody's scanner glass. Conspiracy theorists say that this is a label for a prop piece and that the letter indicates which position it goes in for the shot. There are numerous problems with this, not the least of which is the fact that the letter that appears is clearly a case of pareidolia, I guess it's called, which is when you tend to notice a pattern because the pattern is familiar, like the letter C. You think it's a C because you know what a C looks like, and just because it appears to sort of look like a C, you assume it's a C. It's just kind of a weird thing, but we do it all the time. Second, it happens with faces. The face that's on Mars, that's another one. The face, the mountain looks like a face. It's the same thing. Secondly, it's not seen anywhere else in any of the moon footage or photos. If NASA was dumb enough to put a prop the wrong way up, you'd expect it to be visible on most rocks, or the moon buggy, or the lander itself. Third, and most importantly, no one in the film or television labels their secret pieces like this precisely because such labels might be seen if the director picks a new angle to shoot from. Nobody puts labels on the tops or the visible part of props. And then there's the lunar paparazzi, they call it on Rational Wiki, which is a great one. And I've heard this one many times about the fact that if you look carefully in the reflection of Buzz Aldrin's visor in the famous visor photo, it's possible to see Neil Armstrong taking the photo. But wait, he isn't holding up a camera. So how could he be taking the picture? It must be fake. One would expect that, I guess, if it were fake, but the visor would be reflecting a full film crew, right? In their cameras, of course. The simpler explanation is to look at the camera's use on the Apollo missions. Unlike technology we use down on Earth, NASA's equipment has to be specialized for use in space and for the operation while wearing a spacesuit. So holding up a camera, a compact camera, peering through the viewfinder and snapping away like you're on a holiday just isn't possible. I mean, the cameras used were attached to the chest of the suit. That's right. As we can see in the very photo, if you go to the Rational Wiki website for lunar landing hoaxes, there's a photo of Alan Bean from Apollo 12, and you can see the camera attached to his chest, and you can actually see in the visor of his own visor in this photo a reflection of Pete Conrad, who took the photo of him. So no, that is just the worst reason at all. And if anybody ever says that, you just pull out your phone, you come to Rational Wiki, you go and show them this photo of Alan Bean on Apollo 12, the very next Apollo mission, and where that camera is mounted on him. Yeah. Then they have the takeoff video, video of Apollo 17 lunar module taking off. Often puzzles people because the camera tilts up to follow it in flight, implying that someone was there operating the camera, much to the delight of conspiracy nuts. In reality, the lunar rover had a television camera, the Ground Commanded Television Assembly, or GCTA, and it could receive remote control commands from an operator on Earth, which were used to shoot the launch. Now remember, this is Apollo 17, so they'd had plenty of time to work on this. This is the last mission that they did. So, and on Rational Wiki, there's a photo of the GCTA and the antenna that are mounted on the rover, and you can see the camera's actually pointing down because it's not in use, and it's obviously pivots. Then there's the shadows. In some shots, astronauts' shadows appear to be cast in different directions. Conspiracy buffs with little to zero understanding of how light works claim that this is proof of two light sources. They were really on the moon. There would only be one light source, the sun. However, anyone with even a vague knowledge of reality knows that multiple light sources create multiple shadows for each object, and yet do not create one shadow that points in a different direction. The different orientations of the shadows are due to uneven ground and perspective illusions. This was the first in a series of refutations by Mythbusters. I must say, one of my favorite TV shows ever. Yeah. So you can imagine this. If you imagine that somebody's standing in front of a hill, then their shadow will be pointing sort of upward. And if somebody was standing in a flat ground, then their shadow would be pointing in a different looking direction, even though the sun is in the same place, depending on the elevation of the land behind them. Makes complete and total sense. Image bleed. For various purposes, photographs from the moon feature black cross hairs at regular intervals. In some images, the crosshairs appear behind parts of the image. This suggests that the mind of the conspiracy hack that the images have been tampered with, or much in the style of Photoshop disasters. However, careful examination of this shows that only very bright white areas seem to cover the crosshairs. This is a very well-known optical and image processing phenomenon where the bright white areas bleed across the exposure, covering the crosshairs as the image was captured. In fact, higher quality scans of the same photos, which involved better processing techniques, showed the crosshairs intact. Because people had to go in and prove to these idiots that they were there. I'm just saying. The flag, of course, this is the classic one everybody's probably heard. The U.S. flag planted during the moon landings visibly shake while being handled. This is claimed to be evidence of wind and therefore proof that it was filmed on Earth, on a soundstage rather than in the vacuum of space. In fact, the very counterintuitivity, the vacuum of space, is exactly why you can see it wave the way it does. When surrounded by air, the flag would be subject to air resistance. And so, while it would flap in a strong wind, it would also settle down very quickly as the air buffers against its motion. In space, where there is no air to prevent this, any slight movement of the flag will continue until the friction of the material alone slows it down. The American flag on the moon, on the other hand, can only be seen to wave and move while the astronauts are handling it directly for a bit, and for a bit thereafter. The motion comes not from any wind, but from their movements while positioning it. This gives the material a large kick of kinetic energy, and, very importantly, there is no air resistance to slow it down. So, on its own and not touched for a single portion of time, it doesn't move as expected. This is seen with most flapping material on moon footage, when it is often cited as proof of a forgery, but in each case the material is reacting exactly how one would expect it to react in a near vacuum and with a fraction of the Earth's gravity. So in actuality, this is proving that it's in space. Actually, it's proof positive. It's the exact opposite of what they're thinking. So anyway, I encourage you to check this out. That took almost our whole first section of the show. But I thought that was an interesting one. I've been hearing about this for many years. I hear it all the time when I'm at a bar having a beer. Somebody pops off, and mentions that the moon landing was a hoax. Of course, doesn't everybody know that or something? And I almost always delve a little deeper to find out if they think that's true or they're just being sarcastic. And most of the time they're dead serious. And I just move on. I never spend the time to argue with them. But I'm going to start pulling out Rational Wiki when I encounter some of these folks and pointing to all of the facts. And they'll just shake their head and walk away because these people don't want to believe the truth. That's the truth. It is what it is, All right. I I say that we're gonna hear from some of our sponsors here real quick. So let's do that. At Honey Badger Sungrown, they care about providing natural products. There are no chemical pesticides and no chemical fertilizers used in their cannabis grow, and they are motivated with a passion for natural cultivation. They take pride in sustainable and environmentally friendly cultivation and produce their product on the beautiful Willamette Valley floor. Honey Badger Cannabis is available at a number of dispensaries, including Grow High Station in Portland and Stash Cannabis Company in Beaverton. Ask for Honey Badger Sungrown products at your dispensary. You can visit them online at www.honeybadgersungrown.com. Are you interested in cannabis? Do you work in the industry? If so, you should pick up a copy of the Oregon Cannabis Connection newspaper, available at over 380 locations across Oregon. We cover cannabis news and provide solid information on cannabis in Oregon and nationwide. Find us online at www.occnewspaper.com or pick up a copy at one of our distribution locations. We offer an interactive map on our website for your convenience. Oregon Cannabis Connection, connecting the cannabis community in Oregon since 2010. It's time for Carnival Barks, our weekly Trump Roundup, where we highlight recent alternative facts from the so-called president, a segment where we point out the absurdities, lies, and blunders coming from Trump and his inept administration. This week, Trump has his usual idiotic and ineffective self and his second-in-command globetrotting to North Korea, where our esteemed and completely clueless vice president dropped an ominous warning on North Korea, telling them there is no way longer any room for the previous strategic patience diplomacy that defined our North Korea relationship in the past. Just in the past 2 weeks, the world witnessed the strength and resolve of our new president in actions taken in Syria and Afghanistan, the vice president said. North Korea would do well not to test his resolve or the strength of our armed forces of the United States in this region, unquote. Apparently, the South Koreans are freaking out a bit about this and would like the saber rattling to stop. You think? Mike Pence had a father who fought in the worthless Korean War. Worthless only because it was never resolved and we're still in the war. We're simply have a treaty right now that there is no peace treaty, I should say. There's just a ceasefire. That's all. We're still at war with Korea, folks. And he's spoken about his father having fought in Korea, and he seems to carry some resentments from that, it seems to me. And he also talked about renegotiating trade agreements with South Korea. I mean, right now, when all this is going on, it's just really ridiculous. And then there's the Trump pushing healthcare again, even in the shadow of a government shutdown in just over a week. The Washington Post reported, President Trump is pushing Congress toward another dramatic showdown over the Affordable Care Act, despite big outstanding obstacles to a beleaguered revision plan and a high-stakes deadline next week to keep the government running. The fresh pressure from the White House to pass a revision was met with skepticism by some Capitol Hill Republicans and their aides, who were recently humiliated when their bill failed to reach the House floor for a vote and who worry now that little has changed to suggest a new revision would fare any better. No kidding. It's a big problem, healthcare is, and just a few weeks is not enough time to deal with it. You can't do a damn thing with healthcare in a few weeks. It's just a freaking amateurish way to behave. The man has no experience legislating, and his staff doesn't know what the fuck they're doing. It's really kind of pathetic. Casey Hunt this morning on Morning Joe made the comment that the staff around him has no clue on how to proceed with legislation in Congress. They don't know what they're doing. It's just pathetic. We may have a government shutdown at the end of April, everybody, by the way. We're going to mention a little bit about that in our cannabis segment when we talk about the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment. So Stay tuned for that. The Patriots went to the White House. Yeah, the world champion New England Patriots went to the White House, but they were missing a few players. One, of course, was Tom Brady, who claimed that he had already had engagements arranged and he couldn't attend for that reason. But there were a number of other notable absences. And what they told the New York Times reported, I'm not sure if they told the Times, but the New York Times reported LeGarrette Blount, the running back, he said in a radio interview on the Rich Eisen show, "I just don't feel welcome in that house." Wow. Let's see. Who is the other? Martellus Bennett told reporters after the Super Bowl, "It is what it is. It is what it is. People know how I feel about it. Just follow me on Twitter." The outspoken Bennett had joked that he might move to outer space after Donald J. Trump was elected. But according to some people, Martellus, you won't be able to live on the moon because we've never been there. McCourty, Devin McCourty, a team captain, told Time magazine, "Basic reason for me is I don't feel accepted in the White House. With the president having so many strong opinions and prejudices, I believe certain people might feel accepted there while others won't." Wow. And then, of course, Alan Branch, defensive tackle, told the Boston Globe that he was skipping the event because he was disturbed by Trump's sexist comments captured in an Access Hollywood video. And Danny Amendola, the receiver, thanked Trump for the shout-out and said that he had a funeral to attend. So he had other reasons. And Dante Hightower, he said, been there, done that, having visited with a championship Alabama Crimson Tide, turning down a chance to go to the White House again just because you've been there once, been there, done. That's pretty funny. Well, that's pretty crazy. I know that the owner of the team, Robert Kraft, heaped a lot of praise on Trump, no doubt about it. I'm not a big fan of Robert Kraft generally, actually, but I do like the Patriots. But so there is that. And then we're going to finish our Carnival Heart segment with this real group of winners that spent about 4 hours at the White House having dinner with Trump just a few days ago. Sarah Palin, who said on her webpage, President Trump's invitation for dinner included bringing a couple of friends. Yeah. And it was Stupid Nugent and Little Kid Rock that she brought along. What a threesome they were. It's just amazing. But, beyond their making rude comments about Obama and Clinton while they were there, more than likely, but most importantly, posing in front of a Clinton painting and a Hillary Clinton painting and making rude gestures. The real kicker was Palin's comments to CNN after the White House dinner.
You had dinner at the White House last night?
I did.
Tell us about it. How did that happen?
Well, President Trump had called to invite just to touch base, so asked me to get to D.C. and we'd be able to chat over dinner and asked if I'd invite a couple of friends.
So you brought Kid Rock and Ted Nugent?
Jesus was booked. So, yes, I invited my buddies, Kid Rock and Ted Nugent, some bold, courageous, all-American dudes who I knew would have good conversation with the president and get to express a lot of good middle-class, work ethic type issues and policy proposals that they could all relate to, and that's exactly what happened at the dinner.
Just gotta say, wow. Wow, man. Sarah Palin is really a piece of work. Oh, wow. All right. Well, it's time to move on. It's time to move on out of our Trump segment into in the cannabis news that I like to cover. First, most importantly, we need to talk, folks, because there's a bill out right now in the Oregon legislature that has to be addressed. It's Senate Bill 1057, and it was introduced in kind of a back-assward way, not through the Joint Committee for Marijuana. It was done through a different committee in order to expedite it getting out. And unfortunately, it really is an issue. It really is an issue. It's got some draconian stuff in it. It's got some crazy stuff that wants to raise the price on patients who can't grow for themselves, just crazy. And also lets OLCC conduct inspections and investigations and use any means necessary. Some of the language in this bill, it's absolutely ridiculous, and it's been introduced by, of course, Senator Jenny Burdick, the president of the Senate or something. I don't know. She's not even supposed to be on a committee. She's a co-chair of the Joint Committee on Regulating Marijuana, Joint Committee. Gotta love that. But the truth is that the rules say that as Senate leader, she shouldn't be the head of a committee. And they made an exception for her to stay on this committee, I guess, because they loved the work she was doing, which has been horrible and terrible to patients. She's got a thing for the OMMP and seems to love the highly regulated cannabis industry and the big players with the big money in the cannabis industry. Specifically, she bends over backward for the Oregon Cannabis Association and other high-profile, wealthy cannabis industry people, specifically Sarah Batterby of High Five Farms, who has had her ear for many years, and is a carpetbagger. To be quite honest, Sarah Batterby moved to Oregon in order to invest a bunch of money in a grow operation, and I'd love to see the books for that company, because she had something like $7 million, and I'm sure that they're so in the red and in debt that they aren't sure which way's up right at this moment. And she's flexed her muscles a lot. And Jenny Burdick listens to people like that. She listens to the Oregon Cannabis Association and the companies that are in the Oregon Cannabis Association that have no regard, particularly for patients or patients' rights. Generally, they claim to be doing lobbying work on behalf of patients some of the time, and it's just a farce. Oregon Cannabis Business Council, I think it's called, the OCBC, that's run by Don Morse. That organization is absolutely ridiculous. I'm sorry. We've got 100 companies out of 2,000 in the state of Oregon that are in these organizations that are having too much influence on what's going on in Salem and what's going on with the rules and these laws. And unfortunately, there's not enough patients showing up, and there's not enough patients that make enough stink. So what we need you to do is go to if you Google OLIS, that's the Oregon Legislative Information System. Just Google OLIS, go to the OLIS, click on committees in the top right corner, go down to joint committees, go to the Marijuana Regulation Committee, and contact everybody on there and let them know that you do not support Senate Bill 1057, Jenny Burdick's little, terrible, horrible bill that she's introduced, or the Dash 22s for that matter. The Dash 22 amendments are what she has introduced that have done two main things, okay? It's not pretty at all. The Oregon Liquor Control Commission shall use the system to develop and maintain for the OLCC licensees to, number one, to track the production, processing, and transfer of cannabis by OMMP growers. And the OLCC may conduct inspections and investigations, including inspections and investigations of OMMP grow sites. And on top of that, the OLCC is in the backyard of every OMMP grower that has more than 2 patients. Patient growers will pay $2,000 annually to grow their own medicine in an address where more than 12 plants are grown. $2,000 it's going to cost the first year. It's crazy for patients. This is crazy. You need to call the Joint Committee, call the members, call them now, if you would, and let them know. No to metric for OMMP. No to the OLCC inspections of a primary residence. No to the -22s. Hell, no to 1057. I'd love to just kill it. It has a couple of good things in it, honestly, but there's so many bad things. In my opinion, personally, I think I would just kill it. We'll see what Anthony Taylor has to say next week. He's agreed from Compassionate Oregon. Anthony's agreed to be back on our show this next week, and hopefully we have some more idea of exactly what is happening, because it doesn't look really good at the moment. I mean, it looks really bad. If this bill gets through the way it is now with these -22s, people are really going to start freaking out. I'm just saying. And I'm trying to let everybody know. If you go to occnewspaper.com, we have an action alert we've posted there. If you go to my Facebook page, Oregon Cannabis Connection, I posted an action alert there as well. That's critical, everybody. Everybody needs to know that that's going on. They're having a joint committee meeting Tuesday, the 25th of April, and they have these meetings at 5 p.m. late because they're joint committees, and most of these guys are in different committees, the representatives and senators, in different other committees during the day. So they get together at like 5 p.m. on Tuesdays. And we would recommend that that everybody that can manage go to this meeting and overflow it. Sign up to speak if they allow that. I'm not sure if they're having public comment or not during the period. I think they probably are. And let it be known that you do not want the OLCC taking over the OMMP. And you don't want your fees and costs to increase or reporting requirements to increase or to be forced to use the metric reporting system, which is all of what this bill does, big parts of it. So, that it's a big deal. It's a big deal, folks. So anyway, let's go ahead and talk about Rohrabacher-Farr. The Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment is the amendment that was passed a couple of years ago that prevented the federal government from coming in and raiding a medical marijuana operation that was operating, under state laws. The federal government wasn't going to provide any support for prosecuting those cases, or any money to the localities that actually do the raids, because normally they can keep property when they do these raids, and it was not going to be allowed anymore under this amendment. And it's been in effect until April 28th, which is when the continuing resolution ends in about a week. And this from Art Cosgrove in the Oregon Cannabis Connection. The end of Rohrabacher-Farr, the beginning of the apocalypse. The Rohrabacher-Farr budget amendments is set to expire on April 28th, and without congressional reapproval, a dangerous new wind may be blowing through the cannabis industry. Rohrabacher-Farr essentially says that the federal funds can't be used by the government to go after people who are following their state's cannabis laws. Backed by a Republican, Representative Dana Rohrabacher, a Democrat, Representative Sam Farr, both from California, as well as Democrat from New York, Representative Maurice Hitchley, the bill was both a major breakthrough for bipartisan as well as progressive cannabis policy. But since it is a budget amendment and not an amendment to the actual Controlled Substances Act, it has to get reauthorized every year. Now doesn't seem to be the best time to have to bring it up for a vote, as the ascension of the Trump administration seems to be going against the grain of the otherwise populist message. New Attorney General Jeff Sessions recently sent shockwaves through the cannabis world when he did a press conference where he brought up violence surrounding interstate marijuana trade from states where it's legal, like Colorado, to bordering states where it isn't, like Oklahoma and Nebraska. Sessions went on to intimate that the federal government could still choose at any time to crack down on state-level cannabis industries in states where it has been legalized recreationally or just medically. Leland Berger, a Portland area attorney working with NORML, commented on the issue. Rohrabacher Farr is going to expire in April. There's hope that it'll be renewed. In Congress, Earl Blumenauer, Democrat from Oregon, along with Representative Jared Polis of Denver and Republicans Dana Rohrabacher and Don Young have formed the Congressional Cannabis Caucus. The caucus is going to deal with three major areas according to a press conference they held in February. They're centered on keeping the federal government from interfering with research into the potential benefits of medical cannabis, access for deals with Rohrabacher Farr, and ending the provisions that cause cannabis owners to pay higher effective tax rates and have to pay them with cash due to banking prohibitions. Blumenauer will be doing some public appearances to talk about the caucus and these issues, including an event called Toke Talks, which he's keynoting at the Aladdin Theater in Portland on April 24th. I think he'll be talking about whether Rohrabacher Farr is likely to be renewed or not, says Berger. I'm hopeful that it will. Some, including Berger, aren't even sure Attorney General Sessions will be the AG for long. The fact that there's a question of whether he lied under oath during his confirmation hearing has resulted in the filing of bar complaint in Alabama, he says. If Sessions loses his license to practice law in Alabama, he would likely have to cede the position altogether. That all may be wishful thinking, though, and business owners won't breathe easy until Rohrabacher Farr is reapproved and more permanent measures are taken to protect the legality of cannabis in states where the citizenry have voted for it. Yes, thanks, Art, for that great article. Timely. That's in the recent issue of the Oregon Cannabis Connection print issue as well. If you pick that up, it's on the stands now everywhere. Great publication. I do say so myself, being the publisher and editor. We cover a lot of news and information, so we encourage you to pick it up. I'm planning on going to this event at the Aladdin Theater. It's just a couple of days away, and I'll let you know next week how that went. So, awesomeness, and that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoy this show this week. We enjoy bringing it to you every week and trying to keep you guys up to date. Had a real good breakdown of the moon landing hoax for the early part of the show. Hope you enjoyed that. And if you're interested in more facts for debunking folks that come up to you, go to rationalwiki.com. It's a great or .org. It's a great source for debunking people. And tune in, of course, again next week, because we're here every Friday at 3 o'clock. We post our show, and you can catch us on iTunes. You can catch us on iHeartRadio now. We're finally posted on iHeartRadio, and you can catch us on all of them. Tune in, Google Music Play. I believe we're on Amazon now. I'm checking on that, making sure we're getting on the Amazon. And if you Google, of course, Goddab, you're going to find our website, www.goddabradio.com, and subscribe there, and you'll get an email with a link to our most recent show every week. So until next week, folks, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you then.